Hi, today's topic will be discussing the one common effect of globalization in the Philippines. Let's talk about the effects of the globalization on the Philippines' poverty and inequality rate nowadays. The most common misconceptions about the Philippines' poverty and inequality rate are often deemed to be the result of capitalism. Critics and observers have stated that capitalism has concentrated wealth, those in the hands of a few, which is observed not limited in the Philippines, but might as well across the entire world, who employ such a system. Indeed, one can immediately understand why there is widespread poverty and inequality in the Philippines, because it has employed an economic structure that has favored the rich, much less the poor. However, there is just one massive flaw in this argument: the fact that the Philippines is a poverty rate that is unmatched by its neighboring countries. Data from the World Bank shows the poverty headcount ratio as a percentage of the population, which showcases the latest data found in the Philippines at over 16.7%. In simpler terms, 16.7% of the population of the Philippines is living below the poverty line. Now, when we compare this very same data to very similar countries, we will find awful results. Indonesia has a headcount of only 9.8%, whereas Thailand has 6.8%. Likewise, among the entire region, the Philippines is indeed lagging. Measured as a percentage of the international poverty line, the Philippines is likewise again the highest in the entire Southeast Asia, except for Laos. The most complex capitalist system. The winner takes all, some say. Well, for the most matter, one still needs to understand the differences between a capitalist economy and a crony capitalist economy. Indeed, this is what sets the Philippines apart from its neighboring countries, and much as well as the rest of the capitalist economies of the world. To start, we must first understand the differences between the two concepts. Capitalism is based on the private ownership of the means of production, a free market, as they often say. The emerging victors from here on out are the best entrepreneurs, the best businesses and individuals, as success is based on merit and innovation. Crony capitalism, on the other hand, differs largely. It's a system where success is based on political connections and favors rather than on merit and innovation. In the case of the Philippines, there have been several government officials from the very presidential position to low-level Congress that have been intervening in the market itself by favoring their own family or favoring the friendships they have. Ultimately, this has brought in the concentration of elites, not by the sheer rise of merit, but rather by the rise of political favoritism. Crony capitalism's result, therefore, is less about innovation and more about corruption and rent-seeking, which results in the loss of both public trust in the government and markets. Upon understanding this concept, we can then understand why, in the case of the Philippines, there a huge poverty rate is, simply because crony capitalism has plagued the Philippines even before its independence. The most probable case here can be traced back to the entire agriculture industry. The Philippines has long been begging for good implementation of land reforms. There have been calls from both farmers and international institutions to redistribute land, as these lands were once a result of both colonialism and crony capitalism. Back then, several families would emerge to own large plots of land, often called haciendas. This hacienda system has led several families to own large amounts of land and would own nothing at all. These small families, who until this very day hold a vast amount of wealth because of these haciendas, have eventually become holders of political power. Indeed, one can argue that the very president themselves came into power for years, but did nothing about land reforms simply because they too are owners of haciendas, hectares of land area. The result was, of course, dire. Land reforms simply suggest the redistribution of land from the ones who hold many to the ones who hold nothing. The lack of support then resulted in poor agricultural productivity, simply because when a family owns land themselves, rather than working for someone else, they tend to become more productive. Following this productivity shift, the Philippines, which could have produced more goods for the country, would result in a decrease in rural poverty as a result of the increase in supply and reduction in prices, but also as a result of employment and revenue generation not concentrated to the few. Furthermore, it would also fix the larger issue, which is inequity. Despite many claimed benefits, however, the implementation has been slow. From the time of the American colonization to the many presidents, and even to this very day, as the latest data in 2020 showed, they still need about 523,000 hectares of land. Now, of course, crony capitalism is not limited to land reforms. It is indeed part of it, but it is not limited to it. Crony capitalism has stretched to several other emerging industries, from manufacturing to the service industry. Until this very day, crony capitalism persists, and the very elites that are sitting in the country's largest corporations are not due to their merit to be there, but due to their political connections. Again, this is often debated. Crony capitalism is also seen in Indonesia, Vietnam, and in the cases of Asian tigers, South Korea had also implemented its crony capitalism in the years of its industrialization under Park Chung-hee. So what differed? Why is the Philippines in this picture of having a higher poverty rate than other Asian economies that also have similar crony capitalist systems? Well, this can be discussed in both the failure of these crony capitalists and probably neoliberalism. South Korea's crony capitalism system, even though it saw pervasive corruption, still saw active intervention from the government side. The government itself had favoritism and had pushed and pressured these chaebols to perform on the global stage. The government also pressured them to focus on export markets rather than domestic markets. Doing so would help them become more competitive and bring back foreign earnings. This is a little seen in the case of the Philippines. When the corrupt governments rose to power, they did not force these corruptions to become more innovative or to focus on larger markets, but they rather left them alone with zero regulations. In turn, these corporations focused on the domestic markets. Rather than focusing on improving their products and services, they focused on maximizing profit. Indeed, a result of capitalism, which at the same time has been the cause of why the Philippines have amongst the highest costs when it comes to utilities, which at the same time amongst the most inefficient systems. Can we still blame capitalism in the end for pervasive poverty rates? Well, you can still speculate on that. One other determinant factor that we have yet to miss out on is data on inequality. To most people's surprise, inequality is not as much of an issue as it is poverty. The Gini Index shows that the Philippines is at most like Indonesia, Vietnam, Malaysia, and Thailand. Income inequality, therefore, is not an issue in the Philippines. Then what makes poverty such a huge issue? Well, arguably, we can still trace it back to the cause of agricultural performance and rural poverty. The common dataset we often use is cereal yield, which shows that the Philippines has a very poor yield per hectare, lower than both Vietnam and Indonesia. The case here brings rural poverty. The rural population, which does not have access to land, has been forgotten. Their labor performance has become inefficient, which brings the agricultural industry of the Philippines into the same case as a net importer. This is a surprising fact, especially knowing that a country has a huge amount of labor, and no, it has little to do with geography. Japan is a good example that shares the burden of geographical disasters with the Philippines. However, its agricultural yield in cereals has been massive, even in the 1960s, when farm equipment was not as good as it is today. At the end of the day, we still believe that the Philippines' economy has a big hole in it, which is poverty. The government, until this very day, has still failed to fix this, as they can't immediately fix land distributions, as well as its crony capitalist state. But anyway, do let us know what you think. Thanks for watching.